So here we are, 1 minute till we start the Mabon discussion on Pagan Path study group, which is a live event on September 21st, 2017, Mabon at 10 p.m. I am Mary Elizabeth Micari, and I am here to talk about Mabon. I run a blog and a business called The Magic Apothecary that's been in existence for about 20 years or so. I am an initiated Wiccan priestess, and I run my own covens and have been in several groups in New York City. So here I am. I've been teaching pagan studies for quite a while, so I decided to do them also on the internet. So why not? So here we are. Waiting to start. Just inviting a few more people who said they were interested. It is a little late. There was a typo, unfortunately, in the title. But we are here, ready to go and talk. And if anybody's here that is already involved in paganism, witchcraft in any way, and wants to talk, you're more than welcome to please do. And join in any way with questions or anything else. So here we are. So let's talk about Mabon as a holiday, because this is going to be recorded and be sitting on the group forever and ever. I'm not going to take it off. And you can read that when you join, if you join the group. It's autumnal equinox, which means that it's a day of equal light and dark. The sun is the same length of light as there is darkness, or day as there is night. And the earth itself is standing pretty much straight up. On the southern hemisphere, it's the spring equinox, and that is their Ostara. So we're on the other side, and we're getting ready to go into the dark season, and they're going into the light season. So there's that. There are many pagans down in Australia and all down in the southern hemisphere that celebrate these holidays, and I see them on Facebook, and it's really interesting to see the difference. So it is now 10:01, so I'm starting. If you join, you join, and if you don't, so you can watch this later. As I said, it is a little late on the eastern coast, so we'll see who shows. The holiday of the autumnal equinox, harvest home, Mabon, the feast of the ingathering. Ingathering means taking in of the grain or corn or vegetables or whatever is growing, taking it in. Mian Fumer, or Alban Alfred in the Druid traditions. If somebody's a better Gaelic speaker than me, correct me. I did study a little, but it's a modern pagan ritual of thanksgiving for the fruits of the earth and a recognition of the need to share them to secure the blessings of the goddess and the god during the coming winter months. The name Mabon was coined by Aidan Kelly. Aidan Kelly is a relatively famous author who came later on after Gerald Gardner and others were already an established factor in Wicca, both in England and in America. And he was a new thinker. It was 1970, so things were different, and he thought differently. And he wrote several books, and he was the one who called this holiday the first time Mabon, and it stuck. So it's referencing Mabon ap Modron, character from Welsh mythology, the three pagan harvest festivals preceded by Lammas, Lugnasa, and followed by Samhain. So here we are, it's Mabon. So I'm just going to talk. We'll see how it is that if anybody comes in, and we'll talk about what it is that I want to get across to people. The reason I'm doing it is I think there's a lot of misconception and confusion around the Sabbats. It's very interesting that this year this falls on Rosh Hashanah, and Rosh Hashanah is a Jewish holiday, a Hebrew holiday of harvest, and a Sabbat is derived from the Jewish word Shabbat, or Sabbath also. So this is a creation of Gerald Gardner's. If you don't know who he is, I suggest that's something you look up right away and learn about who he is. I call this group the Pagan Path, and that it can encompass many other pagan paths besides Wicca. But I think that when most people hear Pagan Path, they're interested in Wicca to start with. So Gerald Gardner is the father of that neo-pagan movement. He is the father of Wicca. So there are books about him. One's called Witch Father. And there are other things you can read about him all over the internet. You can just look him up, Gardner, Gardner. And he was one of the first people that started to do these kinds of Sabbats. He wrote about them, his covens celebrated them, and then it came here, and people continue to do it. Once Wicca came to America, it sort of morphed and changed and became, as we are, sort of more free, a little bit less restrictive, constrictive. And so many people celebrate this holiday in many different ways, and I'm going to talk pretty briefly about, well, maybe not so briefly, I'll talk also about the fall equinox in the world and what people celebrate all over the place, what they celebrate. So let's see. Okay. All right, great. So let's just go into Mabon. I'm just going to talk about how to celebrate Mabon and what that means and how we do that. So the autumn equinox falls at different times in the year, by the year. This one particularly is tonight into tomorrow, and it's the first day of fall, or what people think is the first day of fall. So the equinox, as I said before, is when the earth itself is standing straight up. So it's a harvest festival, again. It's sort of about reaping what you sow. So what you sow through the year, starting at around, Yule, okay? In our pagan calendar, the New Year is on Samhain, which is, as we know in America, Halloween. So Samhain is the Gaelic, Celtic word for the holiday. So New Year is then. So from that point until now, what have you sown? What were the seeds? So one of the things I recommend people do if they jump on the wheel of the year at any particular holiday is to see where it is, root themselves in that spot. So here we are in the middle of the harvest season. We just had a harvest holiday in August 1st, which is Lugnasa. And then we have Mabon on September 21st, or thereabouts. So this is the second harvest. And we think about locally, wherever you're living and wherever you're seeing this, you think about what it is that is in season, what kind of plants, seeds, nuts, fruits, vegetables, even meats, cheeses are bringing in at this point of the year. Okay, so we're going to live our lives in the same way. So what are we reaping? What did we sow? So when you jump on the wheel, wherever it is, and if it happens to be today, welcome. This is where I began my journey as a pagan and as a Wiccan, was on Mabon. So what is it that you sow? Get a journal. I suggest a journal, and handwrite, or if you want to, you can type, but make it a pretty sacred thing that you do, and start thinking about what it is that I put in the ground. What did I start? What did I start to create? And then what have I sown? And look at it today and say, what am I bringing in? There's still time to bring things in. Of course, the third harvest is Samhain. So that's the last of the harvest festivals. So what did I bring in? What am I reaping? It's time that you really can reflect on the year and say, okay, what did I want? What did I do? What did I get from that effort? And as we are now very active people in America and other places in the world, we're much more busier than we used to be when our ancestors were just really pretty much getting by on the land and pretty much living off of what that was their reaping and sowing. But we do other things now, many of us. I'm not saying people aren't farmers, and they're still doing reaping and sowing, but they also are other things that we do. So what is it? What was it? What was at the beginning of the year that you wanted to see happen? And what have you gained? And where have you grown? And look at each individual project and thing that you've done this year and take a look. It's not only the year, but that you're looking at, but also at your life. So as we're sort of a clearing off time, okay, this is what grew, this is what I have, what do I want next? Also, what am I going to want to do next? So it's thinking about the whole life and putting yourself in the equinox, in the fall of your life. Even you may be very young and you're not anywhere near the fall of your life, which many people say is about 60 years old. Or if you're older, it could be you've already passed that point. But let's pretend for a moment that either way, it doesn't matter, you're in the fall. So if you're in the fall of your life, what have you achieved thus far? What is the harvest that you've brought in? What have you done? And it's also a time to remember that it's a quiet time. It's the time of pulling in. This is a time, as we know, by the time Samhain comes, by the time October 31st, November 1st, it's very cold and things have stopped growing. And here is when it really starts to show. We start to see the leaves on the trees turn color, and it gets colder, and days are shorter now, very much noticeably so. So that's part of it. So when you're out and walking about, wherever you may be, pay attention and look at the animals out there if you have any. Watch the birds, and I watch the wild cats of New York City do their thing. I do, and watch their seasons. Pay attention to what's growing. Pay attention to the flowers and what they look like on rose bushes or around the parks you might live in, or in your own garden. What's out there? What's happening? How are things now beginning to come to seed for the next year? So, and how are your own projects beginning to come to seed? So, we're going to talk about a thing or two about how to celebrate this holiday then. So, what a lot of people do is they go and say, well, I want to do a whole full magical ritual. In my learnings, I have come to know that it's not that important. It's not important to do a large ritual. You can just do one that's small for yourself and your family. And you can also just do none of that. You can just do a feast. So this is a harvest feast. So it's a lot like Thanksgiving. So one of the first things you want to do is build an altar of sorts. If you don't know what an altar is, think Christian church, or what would be a table sort of that prayer books can lay on in other religions. So in Wicca, an altar has certain things upon it. It has representations of earth, air, fire, and water. So earth can be salt or sand or rocks, air, or other things that you come up with that are earth, wood, earth, air. A lot of times is incense because it goes into the air, or perfumes. Or some people use feathers because they come from the air. Some people just use a sword because the sword in magic is considered an air instrument. So that can be there, sword or knife, something metal. Fire, candle. And if you can't have a candle, a battery-operated candle is totally fine because it is still fire. Water is water. So you have those four things. And what a lot of people like to do on these holidays is to have those things representing the holidays. So they'd be in the right colors for the time of year. And so you would use autumn colors, and like my sweater. And you would maybe bring in leaves and maybe pine cones and seeds and things you find outside, and you can decorate with that. You can decorate with a statue of a god or a goddess that you find that's important to you at this time, or your patroness or patron, god or goddess, if you like. You don't have to. You can put a representation of just the sun itself and the moon herself, and you can have those there to represent that. So that's something you could do. All right, so you can also have a beautiful altar cloth that you make, or people buy them or share them. Please always be careful. I want to say this again. I always say this. If you use fire, be very careful. If you're using dried materials on your altar of any sort, or cloth of any sort, please be very careful, please, with wax and fire. And don't leave candles on if you're sleeping or you leave your house, ever. I know other people will tell you you should never douse a magical candle. I totally disagree with that. Too many people get hurt that way. So if you douse a magical candle and you're going to come back to a ritual, or you're doing a spell that includes a candle, you can put it out and you can relight it. It's totally fine. Please. So people talk about, using a cornucopia, bringing in fruits and vegetables to decorate a beautiful table. So very much like what we do for our American Thanksgiving. And that's that. I mean, that's pretty much the Mabon celebration setup. It's pretty easy. So you should have no trouble. Some people find that they can't really talk about this work with their family or friends, so they don't have to. You can keep this quite to yourself and quiet and in your own space, and it can be with teeny tiny things that represent this for you. Some people will actually decorate an office for fall, but just using leaves and things that mean the same to everyone else on the planet, and yet to them it means a sacred symbol of their religious preparation for this holiday. And that goes for all the holidays. And as we go on, I'm going to talk about more and more of them. I'm just starting today with Mabon because, as I said, this was my first holiday. I wrote about this before, and there's a little blog that I put up. And this is an extremely important holiday to me because it's the first time I ever did any kind of magical working. I had been doing, unbeknownst to me, witchcraft from all of my life. My great-grandmother from Italy was a neighborhood strega, which means witch, and she was reading palms and tea leaves and cards, and her daughter, my grandmother, also learned from her and then taught me because she thought I had the sight. So I learned very young how to read palms and how to read cards and just about plants and different sort of Italian traditional magical things, using a pendulum, a ring pendulum, simple things. And my mother, who's of Irish descent, kept the wheel of the year, but didn't know she was doing it. She was extremely religious in the Catholic Church sense, and she just always kept the wheel of the year. We always celebrated these major steps in the year, always in big ways. She decorated, we made special foods. So that long story short, I had been doing these things for 30-something years, or so 30 years or so, and I walked into Enchantments, which was on East 9th Street between 1st Avenue and 2nd Avenue in Manhattan, because I had been working across the street from it for many months and was too chicken to go in. But this one particular day, there was something about the, you can see a picture a little bit of it on my blog, which is up on this group. And there's other pictures, and I'm going to find them and I'll put them up because a lot of pictures were circulating of that place. Anyway, so it became a special place for me. I was even hand fasted there. So with my current husband and I were hand fasted there, which means married in the Wiccan sense. So that day I went in, and there was a gentleman behind the counter with long, then sort of graying hair, curly hair, and very thick glasses, who said to me, "What are you looking for?" With this very open manner. And I said, "Just to try something. I don't know." And I was so scared. I was sure I was doing a bad thing. And then he said, "Well, you know, it's a holiday. It's Mabon. We just made a fresh batch of incense. It's right there. It's only $5 or $2, whatever it was. Do you want to try it?" I was like, "Okay, what do I have to do?" And he said, "Well, you can use this charcoal in a dish like this." He showed me a fireproof dish, which I knew I had in the house, an ashtray. And then he said, "You can light this there. It's a loose incense, and it'll fill your whole abode with this beautiful smell. And this is a candle, a spell kit." Where they were orange and yellow, I remember very clearly, in this little bag, and they had little candles, and you can use these. And they had symbolism on them, which I've come to realize that it was probably saying Mabon in an ancient alphabet I didn't know yet, and a little thing of oil to use for the candles. I took it. I went home, and I did it, and I said, "Okay," to my son, "We're going to have a fancy feast. We're going to make some really great stuff." And on the way home, I picked up a few things, and we're going to have a celebration, because Joe had explained to me what Mabon was, how it was a harvest holiday, and it was just about eating delicious things and being thankful and thinking about your year. So my little son at the time, very little, and I did that, and then we lit the candles and sat with the beautiful smell, and I never turned back. And from that point on, I worked very diligently at becoming Wiccan and Pagan and witch, and doing the study all of these years since that moment that Mr. Joe Zukowski, which is what his name is, and he's on Facebook if you'd like to say hi, handed me that stuff. So I'm always indebted to him, and he eventually became my teacher, and I studied with him for a couple of years, and I also was hand fasted. He was the high priest at my hand fasting. Thank you, Mr. Zukowski. I'm going to tag you in this so you can see. Anyway, so that's my story of Mabon. What's yours? Do you have a story of Mabon? If you're missing this live because it is a little late, then maybe you can write to me. I'm going to write this so people will see it. Write your story. And then we can all see it and share it. So there's that. So let's go on a little bit, since I only have two little people here and are not saying anything. So I'm just going to go on. And if you guys want to interrupt me at any point, you go ahead and do that anytime. But if you just want to listen, that's very fine too. It's like a sort of a live podcast. Behind me is my home. We're in my living room. And this is my little home PC. And we're in Brooklyn, New York. That's where I am, in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, New York. And here we are doing Mabon. This is actually very close to where I had my first ritual. All right, so let's go on a little bit. Now we're talking about food that came up. So let's talk about what people might want to eat on this day at a feast. There's lots and lots of recipes. I just found a bunch of stuff. I'm going to look at them, and I'm going to put this in here for you guys to read. If you feel like making something, even through the weekend, you can celebrate. By the way, you don't have to celebrate a Sabbath on the Sabbath if you can't get to it, because just like people celebrate Christmas at different times when they see their friends and family, it's when it is. You do it when it is. Remember the day, but you can do your best to celebrate. So on there, you'll see there's different things. There's bread, and a lot of the times you'll find at this time of year, people will use a lot of eggs and honey and stuff to make it rich, and or a lot of things like carrots and apples and salt and cinnamon. I'm looking at recipes. There's also oats that you'll see, allspice. So anything you might see, actually any pumpkin spice you see, it's like that. It's like anything that's in Dunkin' Donuts at this time, that fall taste. But that's the thing, traditionally people would make stuff, because if you can imagine how much came in, if you were lucky, right? You had, if anybody out there has a garden or does plant anything, you know how much you have at this time of year to deal with. And you have to can it, you have to dry it, you have to store it in some way. And I'll be doing that some. I'm going to get as much fruit and vegetables that are current, and I like to dry them, specifically fruits, because you can't get summer fruits in the middle of February, and sometimes you just want a little bit of strawberries or something like that. So I have totally recommended dehydrator. Off the subject, back on the subject. So cinnamon, pumpkin spice like allspice, nutmeg, warming spices these are. You can also use chai, Indian spices, which are like cardamom. You can use black pepper. So the reason why we use those things, for several reasons, and in my herbalism class, I talk a lot about these things. A lot of these spices, if you're pickling or canning with these spices, you're going to preserve the thing inside. Any kind of time you use pepper or garlic or onions, no, garlic more, inside of a recipe, it's something that's going to last. So if you're bringing in tons of apples and you're going to be making applesauce, you're going to be drying those apples, you can dip them in cinnamon and sugar and keep them clean and keep them from rotting over this time of cold coming up. And people had, storage space in cold cellars, and they still do. And that's where people kept these things. So they would make as many pies as they could handle and eat those. You eat what comes in, and or else it goes bad. So today we have freezers, and we can get away with things a little bit better. We're lucky and very blessed to have the chance to eat anything we want at any point of the year. I would suggest, though, when you are celebrating a holiday, try to stick to the local harvest and eat that, and stay with that for as long as you can through this harvest period. And by the way, Samhain, we'll get into that when I do Samhain in a month. Samhain is a meat holiday, so those of you who are not vegetarian will benefit from understanding that those animals had just been slaughtered for you. And it usually was, in the past, animals were slaughtered because they didn't think they were going to make it through the year or had gotten too old. So stuff to think about. We'll get to that another time during our Samhain discussion, which will be up on here. I'll put up a listing soon when I decide the date. Usually I do one every 4 weeks, but if I have to do it sooner because it's sooner, maybe I have to look, it'll be up. So take a look. Don't forget to look. So that's basically it, stuff that you would make in the fall. Right now, after I get done here, I had a lot of peaches. We got a lot of beautiful peaches through the summer, and I'm going to be making a ginormous peach pie so that they don't go bad and they're not wasted. So using everything you have, making sure that it's there. Tomorrow I'm going to make an apple spice cake for my celebration here in my home, as well as a root vegetable stew and salad and as much vegetable as we can stand. And this is to remember at that meal exactly why we're there. I'm listening to a bunch of stuff on YouTube. I'm going to give you also the link. Here, I'll get to it. Moving around. Carefully. No, I can't do it right now. But I will get that. I will get this link on the group so you guys can hear the music I'm listening to as well. It's a lovely mixture of things for Mabon, and YouTube has those things on. You can at any point, oh, there it goes. You can at any point just type in, Mabon or Samhain or whatever music, and you can also watch a video like this, somebody else talking about it, or even like watching sometimes a ritual. You can see pieces of rituals up on YouTube. So